Now, welcome to another Star Wars discussion, where this time I want to tackle an interesting question that comes to us from Bullsith over on my Discord server, who basically asked, what if Leonardo DiCaprio had played Anakin Skywalker starting in Episode 1? How would that have sort of changed the entire history of Star Wars, and especially how much, or maybe how little, would that have changed the way the prequels were viewed back then? And how different would the prequels themselves be, starting out with an older Anakin instead of the 9-year-old played by Jake Lloyd that we got in Episode 1? But before getting into all that, if you have an interesting question or topic for one of these videos, for a discussion video, feel free to leave it below in response to my pinned comment down there. Or if you see one you like from someone else, go ahead and give it a thumbs up so I know what people are most interested in us tackling. And of course, in the comments below, you can also feel free to give your thoughts or opinion on this question about Leonardo DiCaprio in The Phantom Menace, or starting out with an older Anakin Skywalker in Episode 1. Okay, so getting right to it, I think there's a couple different things we could cover here. Everything from, would Leonardo DiCaprio have even considered playing Anakin? Was he up for the role at any point? To would the prequels have been better starting out in Episode 1 with an older Anakin? And how would people have reacted to Leonardo DiCaprio, of all people, instead of Jake Lloyd and Hayden Christensen, two relative unknown actors at the time? How would they have reacted to the superstar in the making Leonardo DiCaprio after Titanic being Anakin Skywalker? But speaking of those two actors, of Jake Lloyd and Hayden Christensen, this video is not meant to be a knock on either one of them. This is just a fun what-if type video. And of all the things I can't wait to see in Star Wars right now that I'm looking forward to the most, seeing Anakin Skywalker once again being played by Hayden Christensen is probably at the top of my list. That said, was Leonardo DiCaprio ever even up for the role of Anakin? Was he in consideration? And the answer to that question is, not only was he up for the role, but apparently he was offered the role of Anakin in Episode 2, but he turned it down. He also turned down other roles such as Robin in Batman and Robin, and he also turned down Spider-Man in the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man trilogy. And the reason he gave for that is he didn't feel he was ready to take the deep dive into something like that at that point in his career. And we could certainly argue that was a really good idea, because a lot of times when you take those kind of big roles, they kind of define you, you kind of get stuck or typecasted, and that becomes who you are. You stop being Leonardo DiCaprio and you become Anakin Skywalker or Spider-Man or whatever the case may be. And sure, a lot of actors do avoid that. Harrison Ford is a really good example. Natalie Portman, another really good example right from the prequels. A lot of people, of course, know her and love her as Padme, but she has gone on to do many other things. Either way, would Leonardo DiCaprio and his major star power draw more attention or lure more attention to Star Wars starting with Episode 1? And the answer to that is maybe. I mean, of all the hyped up films in history, Episode 1 is, maybe 1 or number 2 or number 3. It's right up there with the likes of The Force Awakens, Endgame, and probably Spider-Man No Way Home has had that same kind of, just major hype around it. So I don't know that having him in there, draws any more attention than was already given to that film when it was coming out. Do you maybe have more female fans, younger female fans, interested in Episode 1 that maybe otherwise weren't because of Leonardo being a major heartthrob at the time? Probably. But then again, I think, there's this idea that female fans or women or younger girls don't really get into Star Wars. We saw that a lot with Rey is going to be the one that brings them in. And I don't really buy that. I've never bought that. I think women get into Star Wars, maybe not as much as men, but quite often. My wife, for example, she was younger when the prequel started. She was in her teens. She fell in love with them. So the idea that younger girls, teenage girls, can't get into Star Wars, I think that is kind of BS. And I've always kind of been bothered that, Kathleen Kennedy and others have suggested it's harder for them to get into Star Wars, which is not to say we can't get more female characters. But I don't know. I've always thought that women can love Star Wars just as much as men. So anyway, does Leonardo DiCaprio being in Episode 1 bring more attention to the prequels? Does it lure in more, maybe, female fans? Maybe marginally? I don't know. I think the name Star Wars clearly outshines the name Leonardo DiCaprio. Not that he's not a massive star, not that he wasn't hugely popular then too. But I think it would have been pretty much the same. Maybe a few more female viewers. Maybe people, of course, make a big deal out of, the star of Titanic being in Star Wars Episode 1. But overall, I don't think things would have been much different around the prequels. I don't think, to go along with the second part of the question, that would this have kind of changed the stigma around geeky or nerdy things sooner? Would it have brought about the geek revolution sooner where it loses that stigma and becomes mainstream? And I don't think so. I don't think it makes much difference. I think things like Harry Potter, the Lord of the Rings trilogy, the first Spider-Man trilogy, the Nolan Batman trilogy, I think they all built up to the dam eventually breaking with the MCU and just completely washing away all that kind of stigma. And I think that's what kind of was the breaking point. And I think it still would be the breaking point, even if the prequels are kind of, I don't know, maybe more popular and more mainstream. Even though they were popular and mainstream, let's be honest, I think it was the MCU that really was the straw that broke the camel's back. And they made nerdy and geeky things just completely cool and mainstream. All right, moving on to the next part of the question. Would the prequels have been better with Leonardo DiCaprio playing Anakin instead of Jake Lloyd and Hayden Christensen? And maybe, I guess. I mean, is DiCaprio a better actor than Hayden Christensen and Jake Lloyd? Yeah, I think we could say that. I think DiCaprio is considered one of the greatest actors, certainly of his generation. Would he have been able to shine under the direction of Lucas in the prequels? I think that's the real question. I mean, certainly, again, he's a great talent, but I think Hayden is a great talent too. If he had proper direction in the prequels, he may not have kind of gone away after them. But you look at someone like Natalie Portman, I don't know that she gave a stellar performance in the prequels, and she is an Academy Award-winning actress. So the question is, would DiCaprio have been able to give a DiCaprio performance in the prequels? Again, under the direction of George Lucas, who, if you've seen behind the scenes, a lot of the time he's just saying, faster and more intense. That's kind of his directions. But moving on to the next part of the question, would the prequels have just been better films starting out with an older Anakin in episode 1 instead of the 9-year-old Anakin? And my personal opinion is yes. I have nothing against Jake Lloyd or his performance. It is what it is in the prequels. But I think, starting out with an older Anakin, kind of the same age as Padme, maybe they're both around 17, and maybe we don't have quite the altruistic Anakin that we have out of, Jake Lloyd's performance, that he is, I just want to help for the sake of helping, even though, yeah, he does have his little bit of arrogance in there. He talks about how I want to see all the stars, I want to be the first one to see them all, I've built the fastest pod racer ever. So there is a little bit of arrogance, you could say, a small degree, but I think that's more just average 9-year-olds say that sort of thing. So it doesn't really come across as maybe any sort of future hints of him kind of going to the dark side. He's just this completely, again, altruistic, I love everybody, want to help everybody little boy. And I've always thought if we start out again with a little more cocky, a little more arrogant, older Anakin in episode 1, it makes the Anakin we see in episode 2 maybe make more sense. Though I think you could have gone the opposite route. You could have started in episode 1 with, again, a slightly older, more arrogant, cocky Anakin. And then when we get to episode 2, he's kind of the model Jedi. He's not, like he is in episode 2, kind of whiny, if we're being honest, which doesn't really make any sense. Like, we have no idea what happened to Anakin, from the boy who will win the pod race just to help some strangers out, to the one who thinks Obi-Wan is holding him back, who thinks he should be all-powerful. So again, if we start with a very Jedi-like Anakin in episode 2, and then all of a sudden Padme comes back into his life, this girl he spent a few days with a couple of years ago, maybe 2 to 3 years ago, instead of 10 years ago like we have in the actual prequels. And they had some chemistry back a few years ago. They did have some interest in each other. Maybe there was a moment or two where you could tell if things were different, if he wasn't going to be a Jedi and she wasn't the queen of Naboo. Maybe they do get together, they fall in love and live happily ever after. And so now she comes back into his life, and they're thrown into this situation where they're on the run from assassins. And you actually show that. You don't have them having picnics in wide open fields, completely forgetting about that her life is in jeopardy. You have them on the run. You have another assassin show up. You have another close call of some kind. And Anakin goes from doing his duty. Yes, he cares about her. He remembers her. But he's doing his duty as a Jedi to protect her. And slowly but surely that begins to change from him actually wanting to protect her. And then you don't need them telling each other how much they're falling for each other, how much pain they're in because they love each other so much. You don't need any of that. You just need them visually. You need to sell us that, yeah, they're falling in love, but they both want to resist it. But in the end, they can't, and they end up getting married, or maybe just telling each other they love each other. I don't know that you have to have the marriage at the end. We could start episode 3 or have it revealed in episode 3 that, yeah, they got married and now she's pregnant. In closing here, do I think Leonardo DiCaprio being in the prequels changes things just in and of itself? maybe to some degree. Do I think having Anakin played by an older actor in episode 1, be that maybe Hayden or Leonardo or anyone else, do I think, replacing Jake Lloyd, no offense to the guy, do I think replacing him with someone older and having a relationship started in that episode that makes a little more sense? Not a 14-year-old and a 9-year-old kind of having this weird interest in each other. Do I think it makes more sense to have two 16-year-olds kind of having a moment? Yes, I think that sets up something better down the road. Now, I like what we got, don't get me wrong, but I certainly think, Leonardo or anybody else in episode 1 being an older Anakin would have changed things quite a bit, and I do think changed them for the better. Well, that's all I've got for you this time. Now it's your turn to take to the comments below and tell me what you think about Leonardo DiCaprio being in the prequels, or just an older Anakin Skywalker being in episode 1, no matter who plays him. Would that have been better? Would it have been worse? Or what do you think? Or, by all means, do respond to my pinned comment below with a suggestion or a topic or idea, whatever it might be, for another Star Wars discussion. Either way, leave those comments below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.